So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sasha Couch-of-Corn. I am Executive Director here at Realm of Caring Foundation, and I am joined once again today by Bassel Shaban, who is co-founder and head of science at Cannacea. And if you are unfamiliar with the brand, they are a manufacturer of clinically oriented hemp oils and a Realm of Caring supported brand. So I just did want to also introduce my co-host a little bit more here in a little bit more detail. So if you missed the last time that Bassel was able to join us, he did a few months ago, we did a webinar to discuss maximizing the effectiveness and safety of CBD therapies. And so if you did miss that, you'll find the recording in your client portal at realmofcaring.org or on our YouTube page. But just for a little bit more of a robust background, Bassel here is actually an astrophysicist and has been researching cannabinoid science for over 20 years. He has been formulating oral phytocannabinoid oils to help people since 2012. And it was in 2017 that Cannacea's science-based formulations were officially founded after Bassel and his family actually revolutionized their mother's health through custom organic hemp oil formulations that they had to tailor for her specific sensitive health condition. And then they decided to share their specialized formulations with the world, with you and with me. And he's here today to share all of the knowledge that he's gained along the way. And I just really love to discuss their why and wanted to make sure that I was able to share that with you all who are tuning in to join us. So now I would love to turn it over to you, Bassel, and have you further inspire us with research to support this talk today and really get into what we're going to discuss further.
Thank you, Sasha, for this introduction. It's such an honor to partner the Realm of Caring in educating about safe and effective natural therapies, especially about cannabis, with the significant role this plant plays in humanity's history and clearly its future. We are, all of us, so blessed to be sharing this miracle cosmos together, a universe of energy, animating light and matter in a unified field of manifestation, an evolving, self-regulating, self-aware energy, so beautifully and intricately expressed in this infinite spectrum of life. So it's Cannacea's special honor to be sharing these deeply researched and developed botanical medicines and techniques for optimizing human health, joy, and peace, reintegrating the whole of life into wellness, reintegrating psyche and body, reintegrating humanity as nature. Modern science keeps awakening to the wondrous symphony of nature's phenomena, while nearly 2,000 years ago, Galen famously wrote that physicians assist nature. Thankfully, modern medicine too is again discovering with awe the ocean of therapeutic compounds awaiting in nature, which it seems the majority of pharmaceutical compounds mimic or derive from. Such a return to wholeness couldn't be more timely at this pivotal moment in history with the far-ranging effects of technology on human and planetary health. A time when enlightened development goes beyond the individual to the collective, goes beyond surviving into thriving. So sharing some of these understandings, there's clearly for the integrative practitioner, it's well known that individual thriving relies on some core foundations for health. Here is one model of 6 foundations. Vibrant living nutrition, sufficient quantity and quality of sleep, the purity of our physical and social environment, regular physical exercise, relaxation that balances sympathetic and parasympathetic activation, allowing for joy to rise, culminating with our psychological and spiritual development in a liberated blossoming of mind. As many of us are aware, if these 6 foundations were robustly nurtured in all people, a significant proportion of the adverse health and social conditions we're facing today might be eradicated. So humanity's many ancient wisdom traditions intuited all along what our modern rational sciences keep proving, that alongside the vital nourishment of pure breath and pure water, plants, fungi, and probiotic microorganisms are our great allies for health, where food is our medicine and where medicinal nutrition supports all the foundations of health. Within the vast ecosystem of such vital natural nourishment, cannabis sativa holds a very special and sacred space, paralleling the pivotal role cannabis has played for millennia as a spiritual guide across religions and as a medicine across cultures. Modern clinical science is evidencing more each day the profound capacity cannabis has to support physiological and psychological health, revealing how the unique pharmacological effects of cannabis are due to its unique phytocannabinoids and their wondrous interaction with our core homeostatic endocannabinoid system, as well as modulating a host of other core systems through various 5-hydroxytryptamine, serotonin, dopamine, opioid, GABA, glutamate, and multiple other receptor types. Modern clinical trials and in vitro testing also show these phytocannabinoid effects are significantly enhanced when taken in a holistic manner with all the synergistic compounds produced in cannabis, the full spectrum of phytocannabinoids, terpenes, and polyphenols native to the plant. Most of you are already well aware of these facts, which are outlined in depth on the Cannacea.life website, and which our previous webinar with the Realm of Caring in March also touched upon. Now, as supplement manufacturers, we do not claim that cannabis and hemp can diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease, both for ethical and regulatory reasons. It's a careful balance to be crafting and marketing botanicals while speaking about their health benefits. At the same time, there are urgent public health issues at hand in which humanity's amnesia of nature is clearly a root cause. Thankfully, humanity, science, and the medical community are remembering once again, with an ever-increasing number of human clinical studies showing how the structure and function effects of plant medicines can significantly improve wellness and quality of life, let alone when experiencing a range of health issues. Phytocannabinoids play a very special role in this natural reawakening, which is why Cannacea is honored and compelled to craft and educate about our clinical hemp supplements. For example, let's look at clinically established effects of phytocannabinoid therapy in supporting the wellness of people facing 3 major current health issues: dementia, pain with its opioid crisis, and autism spectrum disorder. Recently published are some pivotal peer-reviewed human studies on the effects of cannabinoids in dementia patients, showing significant improvements in the behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia by taking full-spectrum cannabis oils across the range of CBD to THC ratios, from CBD dominance through to THC dominance. The improvements were mainly quantified by Neuropsychiatric Index Questionnaire, the Cohen-Mansfield Agitation Inventory, and subjective reports by the patient caretakers. These promising results include a randomized and placebo-controlled study by Hermish and colleagues published in 2022, with 40 experimental subjects taking a mean of 525 milligrams of full-spectrum CBD per day at a 25-to-1 CBD to THC ratio, alongside 20 control subjects. Palmieri and Vadala in 2023 also showed significant improvements in some symptoms queried by the mini mental state examination after cannabinoid therapy. These are very significant clinical findings for cannabis to help support quality of life for the ever-growing number of dementia patients worldwide. For the current opioid crisis, several peer-reviewed studies have already evidenced that people on opioids who initiate cannabis therapy are able to significantly reduce opioid intake or stop opioid use completely, alongside reducing subjective pain reporting. These important results include a recently published controlled cohort study by Nguyen and colleagues in 2023, studying over 8,000 subjects in the New York prescription program, split into 4,000 subjects taking medical cannabis plus opioids and 4,100 control subjects taking just the opioids. The medical cannabis group was able to reduce opioid intake by an average 50%, while the control group not taking medical cannabis were only averaging around a 10% reduction in opioid intakes. These, yet again, are very significant clinical findings which support the millennia of human cannabis use to assist with painful conditions. Now, for the very broad range of health and behavioral issues categorized loosely under autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, an issue that is magnifying quite rapidly in modern societies, Ciani Rose and colleagues in 2021 studied 15 child subjects diagnosed to be on the autism spectrum who were taking medical cannabis across the CBD to THC range, alongside 9 typically developing child controls not taking cannabis. Their results show the intake of various phytocannabinoid profiles helped improve the investigational children's behavior while normalizing back to the range of typically developing children several key salivary metabolic biomarkers often correlated with ASD. After analyzing a wider range of 250 biomarkers than were initially reported in their 2021 publication, the Ciani Rose study investigators shared this unpublished graphic on your screens with Cannacea. Here on the right, we see the biomarker chart for one typically developing child who was a control in the study. This chart is mainly clustered within 2 standard deviations of the typical biomarker targets for those 250 plus biomarkers. While on the far left are the biomarker levels for one of the study's children diagnosed with ASD right before their morning medical cannabis intake, sorted by magnitude of discrepancy to typical values. And as you can see, the out-of-range biomarkers are sometimes up to 40 standard deviations from typical targets. Then we see the middle chart, which is that same child with ASD showing those same biomarkers 90 minutes after taking oral medical cannabis, with simultaneous subjectively reported behavioral improvements by the child's parents. In addition to the importance of such clinical findings for the application of cannabinoid therapy, such biomarker tracking is also not only exciting for the future of endocannabinoid diagnostics, because some of these markers involve the endocannabinoid system, but it also gives clear objective evidence for the homeostatic functional effects cannabis has been lauded for across millennia. So, to best harness these special abilities of cannabis to support health, which biological mechanisms we are beginning to uncover through the lens of modern science, it is imperative that today's integrative practitioner becomes well-versed in the safe and effective application of phytocannabinoid therapy. Cannacea provides guidance for how to maximize the efficacy of phytocannabinoid therapy in our supplement monographs. Such techniques for maximizing efficacy were touched upon in our first Realm of Caring webinar in March, now available on YouTube and on the ROC platforms. For any interested health professionals as well, Cannacea offers free consultations with our science and medical teams to optimize efficacy and safety through patient-specific cannabinoid therapies. So please feel at liberty to visit our clinic.cannacea.life website to schedule such a consult. It is our mission and honor to support your health practice, as it is likewise for the superb Realm of Caring specialists who also provide free cannabinoid therapy consultations accessible through the ROC website. Moving ahead, please note, unlike CBD, since THC-type cannabinoids can be potent agonists of the major CB1 and CB2 cannabinoid receptors expressed throughout the human brain and body, THC-dominant therapies can quickly generate significant physiological and psychotropic effects mentioned in our clinical monograph. These can be very effective therapeutically, but these effects also require specialized safety measures we will present on at a later date. Therefore, with integrative medicine encompassing all modalities that promote genuine health, a holistic approach that holds the future of medical care, we'll spend the rest of this hour uncovering the core safety aspects of utilizing CBD-dominant full-spectrum hemp supplements for optimizing human health.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing just that very significant and very recent research as well. It's really important to see what we're currently finding to support, as you said, the how many years of use for this wonderful plant. So thank you for
Absolutely.
bringing that to light. And before we
Pleasure.
really dive into those clinical aspects of the safe usage recommendations by physicians, are there some basics that we want to first cover for when administering CBD?
Thank you, Sasha. There are some relevant foundations for cannabinoid therapy safety, especially in clinical applications. Products used need to have lab certified screens for purity, at least the state hemp regulation standards, but ideally to higher standards, especially for clinical applications. So, for example, testing for the widest coverage of 450 plus pesticides, testing for glyphosate, or Roundup, and other common plant growth regulators. Ideally, the product would not only have no impurity detections above the declared safety limits of state regulations, but instead of just passing, it would ideally have non-detect results to high resolutions across the board. Alongside the other core chemical and microbiological assays, there's the mycotoxins, there's the toxic metals, and stability screens. As well of importance is triple testing of oil quality for primary oxidation, secondary oxidation, and hydrolytic degradation markers of freshness, let alone the importance of the non-oxidated status of these oils for patients experiencing any inflammatory conditions. So this hopefully also answers one of the pre-webinar questions we received. Such quality assurance summary reports and third-party ISO-accredited certificates of analysis that would be attached to such a summary report represent a clinical standard of purity disclosure. Also critical for safe and effective clinical applications of such botanical products is confirming a safe and effective, accurate level of declared target cannabinoids for precise, repeatable, and quite safe intakes of prescribed levels by the health professionals. So breaking that potency down per milliliter, per serving, and per droplet, which is very helpful for personalized intake therapy, which the droplet form of the tincture is very useful for honing in, zoning into what really each patient requires. The quality report would also ideally confirm that the product contains a genuine full spectrum of primary and secondary cannabinoids, along with the volatile yet synergistically crucial monoterpenes from hemp, which are alongside the sister sesquiterpenes that are less volatile. I mean, those monoterpenes tend to be lost in processing. And then it's ideal to also have testing to confirm the presence of at least the key polyphenols, which in hemp are the canflavins, representing the largest fraction of polyphenols in the cannabis flower, and to confirm the truest full spectrum. Obviously, providing practitioners with an in-depth analysis as well of not just the cannabinoids, the terpenes, and the flavonoids, but ideally as well the fatty acid profile and the nutritional mineral profile together constitute over 90% of the mass content of these oils, which is testament to how health supplement validation, transparency, and nutritive disclosure is particularly suited for the sensitivity and responsibility of clinical use. And we're very thankful in the modern era to have access to these types of analytics. So with quality of product purity and potency being established, the physician can then initiate the required protocols for safe and effective administration of full spectrum CBD.
Yes, and that's something that we hold very highly to, because the quality of your product absolutely matters. The quality of the product that you're suggesting absolutely matters. And so thank you so much for going into those fundamentals in a little bit more detail for us. So now if we would like to share some of those clinical aspects of understanding drug interactions and the safety for CBD dominant therapy, I think that's a great next step.
Thank you, Sasha. So moving across, all protocols for optimized efficacy of use and the safety cautions that we will review today are covered by Cannacea's in-depth clinical supplement monograph, which is available on our specialized practitioner site, clinic.cannacea.life, which is also linked from our cannacea.life public website. There's a link there for health professionals. For the general public, we also have published our abbreviated public supplement monograph for safely and effectively using our organic full spectrum hemp oils within our suggested use intakes. Our public monograph and product labeling advise users to seek physician guidance before use, especially if you have a medical condition, take medication, or fall under any of the special safety cases we'll be discussing today. You can find our public monograph on our cannacea.life website, as well through the QR codes on Cannacea product packaging. Now, back to our clinical monograph, which really covers a wide range of all these main safety and efficacy of use issues. For our core practitioner audience today, we are going to be focusing from these key warnings and precautions listing. In our discussion today, we'll highlight the salient aspects of contraindications, special populations, adverse effects, and especially crucial in our pharmaceutically laden modern societies, one of the headlines of this webinar, drug interactions. So please feel free to lean into this detailed and richly referenced Cannacea clinical monograph to inform your application of full spectrum hemp therapy to learn more. Now, before starting a patient on any cannabinoid therapy, while it's obvious, it should be noted that the practitioner confirmed the lack of patient allergies to hemp, to cannabinoids, or to any of the other ingredients in the product. Next, potential adverse effects, especially if a physician is recommending and monitoring intakes of our full spectrum hemp oils above our maximum suggested use meant for just regular supplementation. As CBD intakes increase, the most common dose-dependent adverse effects to look out for are sedation or drowsiness and lethargy, potential appetite changes, and potential for gastrointestinal disturbances like diarrhea at high intakes. Some less common adverse effects reported in clinical trials of CBD also include potential dermal rashes, pulmonary and pharyngeal irritation or infection, and fever. And then there's also much less common side effects that will constantly appear in various patient populations. Also, for high oral intakes of full spectrum CBD products, there's the potential in some users for THC sensitivity. While for most users taking lower intakes, the levels of THC in a typical full spectrum hemp oil with 20:1 and higher CBD to THC ratio should not cause adverse THC effects. For patients prescribed high levels of full spectrum CBD by their physicians, especially for patients with schizophrenia or psychosis, or that minor proportion of the population with significantly heightened sensitivity to THC, adverse THC effects may start to be experienced. This is a major reason why Cannacea crafted our Tahrids 100 formulation we specially developed between 2016 and 2017 to support the wellness of our mother, Tahrid, as she continues battling her advanced Alzheimer's disease and psychosis 7 years on. Cannacea Tahrids 100 is specially formulated to provide a very rich full spectrum, while importantly, having a lower relative THC level with its specialized 70:1 CBD to THC ratio minimum that significantly controls for THC side effects at higher full spectrum CBD intakes. Additional details on such potential THC side effects are available to practitioners in our clinical monograph. Now, this would also be a good time to answer another one of the pre-webinar questions we received, mentioning that for the elderly in general, CBD intakes should be cautious and conservative throughout the regimen from the start to respect the greater frequency of decreased hepatic, renal, or cardiac function, any other medical conditions, and the physiological as well as interaction effects of parallel therapies. So now moving more deeply into special populations. If a female patient is pregnant, breastfeeding, or is planning either, we advise that they avoid cannabinoid intakes until clear research is established on the safety profile of cannabinoid exposure during pregnancy and while nursing an infant. Animal studies in mammals show clear evidence of dose-dependent teratogenicity when the pregnant mother consumes cannabinoids like THC and CBD, especially at higher doses, which include negative effects on implantation of the embryo and on development of the fetus. Postnatal animal motor development has also been adversely affected when the nursing mothers are given high levels of cannabinoids like THC and CBD. This can be a controversial subject, but until clear human pregnancy and lactation cannabinoid research findings become available, as a clinical level hemp supplement manufacturer, Cannacea has a responsibility to advise practitioners to contraindicate the use of cannabinoids in your pregnant or nursing patients and up to 6 weeks beforehand due to the long clearance time of lipophilic cannabinoids from the body. The second special population are those with moderate or severe liver disease, classified as Child-Pugh Class B or Class C, respectively. Since the liver converts 80% or more of the CBD that's ingested orally, absorbed by the intestines and metabolized into CBD's inactive metabolite, 7-carboxy-CBD, before reaching the bloodstream. If someone who has moderately or severely compromised liver function takes CBD, they'll have a significantly higher plasma level of parent CBD than the typical user taking an equal amount. While the ingestion of any substance requires extreme care and consideration by the physician of hepatically impaired patients, Taylor and colleagues in 2019 showed that patients in Child-Pugh Class B had double the typical CBD plasma levels of a healthy adult, while patients in Child-Pugh Class C had over 5 times the typical CBD plasma levels, pointing directly at that reduced metabolic function of the liver converting CBD into its inactive metabolite. That being said, it is still not clear how chronic use of CBD impacts the liver in hepatically impaired patients. Therefore, if you are the doctor of a patient in Child-Pugh Class B or C, please take special caution if you recommend the use of CBD. Also, alanine aminotransferase, ALT, and aspartate aminotransferase, AST, as well as bilirubin testing should also be done at baseline before initiating CBD treatment and at regular intervals to monitor any changes or indication of exacerbated liver issues. Moving on, there is one key special population we shall also cover today. This is people having cytochrome P450 polymorphisms. Some of the most common CYP450 polymorphisms involve the gene encoding of CYP2C9, 2C19, and 3A4 enzymes, which are not only responsible for the metabolism of a large number of common drug substrates, but importantly for our discussion today, are also the main enzymes responsible for metabolizing CBD and other phytocannabinoids. In general, for the 57 CYP450 enzymes genetically encoded in humans, variations in the expression of some of these enzymes can range across ethnicities from less than 1% to over 60% of the subject populations in some studies. Importantly, for practitioners recommending cannabinoid therapy, such patient-specific CYP polymorphisms can cause significant differences in CBD plasma levels between patients and is a major contributing factor for the highly personalized sensitivity to CBD and THC intakes commonly recognized across populations, let alone the importance of CYP polymorphisms for practitioners in general, since the vast array of commonly prescribed pharmaceuticals are also affected, including in prodrug administration, due to alterations in metabolizing rates of the prodrugs into the target active drugs by the liver. Since genetic profiling of CYP enzyme expression is not frequently undertaken by most patients, the discovery of these patient-specific CYP enzyme activities are usually empirically determined by trial on a case-by-case basis through a responsible, carefully up-titrated, practitioner-guided and monitored prescribing of drugs and supplements, especially when those are combined. So this point of combining prescriptions and liver enzyme discussion leads us perfectly into our final safety topic today, drug and supplement interactions, which was one of the headlines of this discussion. CBD, the other cannabinoids, and their metabolites are known to be potent inhibitors or inducers of many of the cytochrome P450 liver enzymes and some phase 2 UGT liver enzymes, as well as various transporters such as BCRP, BSEP, and P-glycoprotein, which altogether are some of the main ways that the human body metabolizes many drugs and other supplements. Such effects can lead to significant increases or decreases of those other concomitant drugs and supplements concentrations in patients' blood than was anticipated before they initiated CBD intake. This is usually why users taking one or more pharmaceutical drugs or other supplements sometimes begin experiencing increased side effects of the drugs or other supplements they're taking when starting or increasing their CBD intake, as well as experiencing a potential for increased or decreased pharmacological effects from those other drugs or supplements than was intended. This is an especially serious consideration when a patient is prescribed numerous pharmaceuticals and is also prescribed high levels of CBD, such as in patients with epilepsy, due to the significant drug interactions known to occur between CBD and some major anti-epileptic drugs. Vice versa as well. Any drugs or supplements taken alongside CBD that are themselves inhibitors or inducers of the main liver enzymes that metabolize the cannabinoids, CYP2C9, 2C19, and 3A4, as we just mentioned a moment ago. These other inducers and inhibitors have the potential to increase or decrease the plasma levels of CBD and the cannabinoids, therefore either increasing CBD's intended, adverse, and interactive effects, or decreasing the therapeutic efficacy of CBD use, respectively. Even taking something as common as grapefruit or its juice, which contain furanocoumarins known to be significant inhibitors of the CYP3A4 enzyme, which metabolizes the cannabinoids. Grapefruit can potentially increase the effects of CBD when taken together. Also, combining CBD with common central nervous system depressants like alcohol, barbiturates, benzodiazepines, muscle relaxants, and others can also increase the risk of drowsiness or sedation. Combining CBD with common sleep-promoting herbs and supplements can also magnify their somnolent effects. Therefore, drug interaction potential is a highly patient-specific, case-by-case issue that requires careful analysis and monitoring by the patient's doctor, and also requires gentle, carefully, and slowly raised intakes of CBD. For your added reference, let's look into a special resource that we've created, which our clinical monograph also goes into further detail. So a lot of these facts are there in the clinical monograph if you want to get further details and reference. So here, for example, is something that is tied into our clinical monograph that doctors can access at will through our resources. This is a compilation that Cannacea has created to support practitioners' practice. This is a listing of potential interactions between our hemp oils and over 1,000 common drugs and supplements listed by their generic names. We always recommend also cross-checking for potential interactions via your trusted interactions resource, such as Drug Bank, for example, especially if our list does not show an interaction for the drug or supplement you're searching for. This covers both how the hemp oils can affect these drugs and supplements, as well as how these drugs and supplements can affect the function of the hemp oils. Tying all of this together in terms of clinical practice, we shall end by stressing, yet again, the old adage for safe, effective, and personalized cannabinoid intakes. Start low, go slow, and stay low. which is more precisely described and quantified in terms of milligrams of CBD per kilogram of body weight per day within the intake section of our clinical monograph, and which tried and tested approach is the best way to catch and mitigate these safety topics we've just gone through, such as adverse effect potentials, CYP polymorphism effects, and drug or supplement interaction potentials, let alone how such a slow and progressive approach to cannabinoid intakes is the ultimate route for optimizing efficacy by respecting each person's unique endocannabinoid system tone, constitution, and sensitivity. Thank you.
Thank you, Basil. That was so well-rounded and so wonderful. And thank you for everybody who put questions in advance and being able to weave those into your presentation as well. And we did have a few extra questions that I would love to get answered for some of those individuals who are tuning in, and as well for those individuals who are on now. And if you do have questions about the presentation or just questions in general relating to the safety of CBD therapy, please feel free to use that Q&A box and we can go through those as well. So one of the first things that I think might be good to tackle is the question about long-term effects. I think this is a question that comes into the realm of caring care team pretty often as well, because people are concerned just not knowing what are the potential long-term effects. And as we have spoken about, there's not a lot of research to support except for the one with the nematodes. But if you wanted to offer some insight to that, and I could also follow up with some information from the nematode study because it is pretty relevant, I can do that as well. So what do you think about long-term effects, CBD?
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you. That's an important question. And
yeah,
we should also remember that in speaking about holistic medicine, there is, in general, millennia of safe documented use of cannabis in human beings. So starting from that level, it's clear that these naturally found cannabinoids, found at naturally present levels, so not synthetic and not minor cannabinoids that get magnified to tremendously high levels. In a natural profile, there seems to be thousands of years of history of safe use, and anecdotally as well in the modern era, people taking these modern products that are manufactured to high purity and quality standards. There isn't seen any major long-term adverse effects to the system, besides obviously some of these precautions and safety cautions that we've mentioned for today. Clearly, the study in animals, models, and in humans is crucial, and there is not so much data out there for long-term chronic use. You mentioned the nematode study that showed no real reduction, we can say, safely speak, in the lifetime of the nematodes.
exactly.
But there's also been some significant studies done in animal models that were testing very high doses. So while in human beings, CBD seems to have a well-established safety profile for both acute and chronic usage. It levels up to 20 milligram per kilogram of body weight per day. This has been shown in various clinical studies studying a whole host of patients with certain health conditions as well as healthy subjects. There do remain lingering questions about the effects of long-term high CBD intakes on the liver in particular. So these modern toxicology studies on animals have dosed sometimes hundreds or thousands of milligrams of CBD per kilogram of body weight of the animal per day. And it's not surprising that at such a high level, they started to see some liver abnormalities, as well as some reproductive system abnormalities and increases in organ weights that oftentimes resolved after reducing the CBD intake back down again. But other animal studies that did lower dose CBD toxicity analysis that is more relevant to the human clinically relevant intakes established in rodents, for example, a relatively high, no adverse effect level of about 100 milligrams CBD per kilogram per day level. And again, we're reminding that in the human studies, 20 milligram per kilogram per day is what is usually recommended as a maximum. Some physicians prescribe above that for certain reasons. But while you cannot do a one-to-one comparison between different mammalian species, this is an indication that it isn't necessarily something that is yet clearly evident from the data about what's going to happen in the liver at these more humanly relevant CBD intakes. And importantly, other animal studies have shown that the intake of CBD, for example, actually can reduce liver injury after excessive intake of certain toxins. This was reported in 2015 by Vilela and colleagues, in 2017 by Wang and colleagues, and human studies in healthy subjects at high intakes in the range of 20 milligrams of CBD per kilogram of body weight per day, which is around 1,500 milligrams of CBD per day, showed, for example, in the mini review, an interesting study by Watkins and colleagues in 2021, that a minority of people, healthy subjects, can display elevated ALT and AST levels in a dose-dependent and reversible fashion. It should be noted that ALT and AST elevations alone are not usually sufficient indicators of liver damage, because importantly, these human liver studies did not usually show elevated levels of the more serious bilirubin indicators. While these studies also indicated significant potential for some causative increases in ALT and AST due to simultaneous acetaminophen intakes or other unidentified confounding variables, there clearly remains more clinical research to be done in humans to confirm if and how clinically relevant intake levels of CBD could ever actually impact the liver adversely instead of supporting liver function and health.
Very good. Yes. And so more research absolutely is needed. But from what we know so far, we know that it's safe, but to use precaution when it comes to specific conditions or medications that individuals might be taking. So one individual did write in. I'm going to leave out some of the specific medication names that they used, but I can explain generally what they are. But this individual was explaining that they were taking an SSRI daily for many years, and several years ago they had begun CBD oil, and the combination of the two was extremely activating, that they said they had difficulty sleeping, so they stopped using the CBD oil. However, knowing the benefits, they would really love to try it again. And they also suffer with chronic pain and from an injury and are on medications for pain daily as well. Their doctor is on board with them to take CBD oil, and they're just wondering how you would suggest switching from the pharmaceuticals to taking a CBD product or using a CBD product.
Thank you, Sasha. This is a very relevant question, especially in today's highly pharmaceutically prescribed psychiatric issues. So it sounds, I mean, when you mention SSRI, which is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, with CBD in the same sentence, it sounds like this person experienced what is known as serotonin syndrome. So many of these SSRIs are listed on the Cannacea interactions list. So having taken CBD with one of them, it usually leads to above intended levels of serotonin in the brain, which manifests in a host of symptoms such as agitation or insomnia. These are typical of serotonin syndrome. And this can be quite a dangerous interaction if taken too far. And then also if the patient is taking other pain medication or central nervous system depressants and relaxants, like we discussed earlier, these will interact with CBD to potentiate relaxant and sedative effects, as well as any opioids having their effects potentiated by simultaneous CBD intakes, let alone the liver enzyme drug interaction that can happen with inhibition by CBD. So should a patient wish to initiate CBD therapy again, they need to consult with their doctor who seems to be on board, like you said, about whether and how to down titrate the intakes of the pharmaceuticals gently in a stepwise fashion in parallel with simultaneously adding CBD from very low intakes of CBD and gently increasing the CBD intakes stepwise in small increments in parallel as a balance. this truly is always, as it is with cannabinoid therapy in general, a patient-specific art as well as a science.
Yes, thank you for that. And speaking of the drug interactions as well, someone did ask if you could repeat the drug interaction checker. So maybe also you can explain where to find it on the website, on the Cannacea.life website.
So we have reserved these more in-depth clinical materials for health professionals. Our public supplement monograph is found throughout our public website, Cannacea.life. It's found in the lower left corner in the menu bar, also on the QR code of all our products. So you can access it directly to our website. That's the public monograph, and it has a link there to the clinical monograph, which is to be given to your practitioner. Because when it comes to drug interactions and any of these special populations, the physician is the one that needs to give the advice. We are here to provide the maximum education and guidance for the physician to then decide what's best for each patient specifically. That being said, on our public website, there's a link to our practitioner site, which if someone just Googles Cannacea, they will find the public website, and from there, early on the page, there's a link to the practitioner site, which, if you can remember, is clinic.cannacea.life. On that practitioner website is the clinical monograph, and in the clinical monograph, under section 6 for interactions, you'll find a link to that 1,000+ listing of pharmaceutical and supplement potential interactions with CBD.
Thank you. And now I have had two questions that asked that's the two individuals who asked the same question. So thank you for going over that again. Someone wants to know specifically about drug interactions with blood thinners. Is there any new research to support, caution?
Absolutely. So there is a clear interaction that happens, again, due to CBD, usually inhibiting the liver enzymes that metabolize the pharmaceutical blood thinners. There's usually seen a significant increase in the level of these blood thinners in the blood of the patients. And this also then increases the risk of bleeding, hemorrhaging. It basically thins the blood beyond what is intended by the prescribed dose. So there is a well-established interaction between cannabinoids and blood thinners. So consult with your health professional on that, so that if you're going to add phytocannabinoids, they do that same protocol we just discussed about having to usually down titrate the pharmaceuticals. Again, there can be induction effects that will actually reduce the level of pharmaceuticals. So that's why, in general, there is now these protocols that practitioners are well versed in, whether it's using symptomatology as a marker or using actual diagnostic testing of the blood and other body fluids as markers, to understand how the drugs prescribed are performing their intended function. Then as you slowly and gently up-titrate the cannabinoids, those markers, whether symptomatological or actual analytical, would need to be monitored, and then you can understand whether you have to reduce or increase, in some cases, the doses of some of the pharmaceuticals. And very interestingly, Kossis and Vrana showed in 2020, I believe, that for certain pharmaceuticals, depending on the human being's constitution and genetic and the genome, cannabinoids can, in some cases, inhibit the liver enzyme and cause greater levels of the pharmaceuticals, whereas in other patients, the same cannabinoid profile with the same pharmaceutical intake can actually induce the liver enzymes and reduce the levels of the pharmaceuticals. So again, that's why we specify a patient-specific, careful monitoring by the practitioner always. So all this information is for the practitioner to guide the patient, not for the patient to do it on their own, so to speak.
Yes, very important note that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Someone asked, how does the terpene profile of CBD affect medication interactions, specifically beta-caryophyllene, BCP?
So the terpenes in general are quite pharmacologically active. This is part of the magic, we can say, in botanical therapy, aromatherapy. Anyone who's hopefully well-versed in essential oil therapy, using it safely and within its own very specific safety guidelines, will know clearly how effective these terpenes can be for supporting human health. Now, on top of that, the synergistic effect of the terpenes on their own in the cannabis medicine, plus how they interact with the cannabinoids to improve the efficacy of the cannabinoids, this also is something that is quite effective at supporting human health. Beta-caryophyllene in particular is a sesquiterpene. It tends to linger. It's not one of the more volatile monoterpenes that are sometimes even more potent pharmacologically, but that disappear in processing most of the time. Beta-caryophyllene tends to be found in many full spectrum cannabinoid products. And beta-caryophyllene, it's interesting that the viewer asks about this one because it also has been shown to have its own endocannabinoid effects, research showing that it seems to be also an activator of the CB2 cannabinoid receptor. So this beta-caryophyllene and all these other terpenes are going to have, each of them, as shown in the scientific literature, various effects on the liver enzymes, and thus are going to interact variously with each patient's constitution and prescribed drug regimen. So while in the cannabis flower, especially these more phytocannabinoid-rich flower varieties, the cannabinoid to terpene ratio is usually not less than 5:1. Some wild varieties and ancient varieties might be closer to 2:1, 3:1. But I'm mentioning that because what that means is, especially with the cannabinoids having such potent systemic effects at times, with a 5:1 ratio or higher, when you take these balanced, naturally formulated type of formulas that don't have these tremendously higher unnatural levels of terpenes, the ones that are formulated more naturally, it's the cannabinoids in general that are going to lead the way in terms of these interactivity effects. That being said, with all of this complicated facts and so many things happening, this is the beauty of integrative medicine. Across thousands of years, it's always done in a step-by-step fashion, building up for the patient's constitution from low levels. And then as that increase in dose happens, then the practitioner can see for that specific patient how this formula is affecting them, and then can manage the balance accordingly.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. It's always fascinating once you get into the all of the ingredients that are going to be in there and get into the terpene blends. And so this question kind of follows that one because, and I know you spoke to AEDs, anti-epileptic drugs or anti-seizure medications, but this individual is asking if there's any drug-to-drug interaction information available on CBD to THC ratioed products, so full spectrum products. Because looking at children with epilepsy, they're often on CBD to THC ratio. So what do we know about full spectrum and potential drug interactions?
So this is a very relevant question. And a lot of the research that has come out in the last decade has been more focused on CBD's special interactive effects, because it's the one that has entered into clinical trials. And while there is also significant research done due to some pharmaceuticals that have a 1:1 CBD to THC ratio, so which is known globally as Sativex. And it's clear that the cannabinoids, they all tend to affect these same core hosts of liver enzymes that we mentioned on our monograph and we talked about today. And CBD itself has a very potent ability there. So the CBD to THC ratio is going to alter how that formula, like let's say you're taking a global total amount of phytocannabinoids, but within that, you're shifting the ratio of how much CBD comprises that and how much THC. You will see variations on the drug interaction profile when you do shift that. But again, the same point we're repeating over and over again is that it is patient specific. And so, as we said, for some pharmaceuticals in some patients, a certain formula is going to boost that pharmaceutical's level in the blood, whereas in another patient, it's going to drop the pharmaceutical in the blood. So you cannot give for such a complete synergy of compounds entering such a complex and beautiful living system. You can't give a one size fits all, like this is going to do that. So that's why there is experimentation that's involved. And as is well known in more serious health conditions like epilepsy, every patient is going to have a kind of phytocannabinoid and even terpene profile that is going to get them to where they are hoping to get symptomatologically in terms of quality of life and wellness, that needs to be tailored. And within that same umbrella, when it comes to the drug interactions, there's going to be a very patient-specific interactions based on the formula. But thank you for that interesting question. Very relevant.
Yes, and to continue on with the interactions and the differences of CBD and THC in different conditions, an individual wrote about helping individuals with bipolar disorder. So they found that even small amounts of THC might cause intoxicating effects or those that mimic psychosis. However, when they were using a CBD product in a small amount of water, they found it was actually very calming during ramps of anxiety. And this is a full spectrum CBD product that they were using. So understanding the CYP450, could you explain this?
Very interesting. This is
Yes.
a very specific question.
Mm-hmm.
The water intake aside, which when you take a lipophilic or a fat soluble product, even if the cannabinoids themselves can be sometimes made water soluble, the cannabinoids themselves are lipophilic, and there's special emulsions to get them to carry disperse in water. So if you're putting an oil into water, and there also, we mentioned this in all the efficacy data we provide in our monographs and in the talks we had in March, that the cannabinoids taken with fat-rich foods are going to have significantly higher absorption rates. So taking it with water, especially alone, you might be subject to potentially lower bioavailability of the cannabinoids. And this might be one of the factors that might make that dose seem like it is not having the complete pharmacological effect that one was experiencing when taken in a more bioabsorptive manner. That being said, as we mentioned earlier, THC is a potent agonist of these cannabinoid receptors. And that's why in special cases like those who are prone to psychosis, as an example, once THC starts to come up there, you can have these psychotomimetic effects, which are mimicking psychosis and creating agitation, and it's anxiogenic. So that's why, certain formulas will reduce THC relative level to CBD, as Cannacea has one of those formulas. And some people find that moving to a broad spectrum product that has had 99.99% of the THC taken out can then control for that. However, there is one challenge with the broad spectrum extracts is they have been distilled in a way that you're losing some of that botanical power, the infinitude of compounds that nature intended. So that's why ideally it is best to try reducing as much as possible the relative THC level, either by combining the full spectrum oil you have with a broad spectrum product or with a purified CBD or isolate product, so that you're still getting that full spectrum power coming in, but you lower that proportion of the full spectrum in the intake and you increase the broad spectrum or CBD isolate. So then you tailor for that specific patient. In this case, we're talking about bipolar patient, exactly what is the CBD to THC ratio they're going to get that gives them the therapeutic effects that are desired while controlling for these adverse THC effects. That's what we had to do with our mother Tahrid, and that's how this formula Tahrid's 100 of Cannacea's was born. So good luck with that, and thank you for this question.
Thank you, Basil. And that it's also great that you can tie in the story of Cannacea into answering that question and helping someone else who might be going through a like situation, or helping a patient with a like situation. And that was actually our last question. So it's a nice way to round it out, bring it full circle back to the beginning. And we're at the top of the hour. So how about that for time? So thank you so much again for joining. For all of our practitioners who are joining, this episode or this webinar will be recorded and it will be uploaded to the healthcare practitioner portal. It will also be in our client portal, and we'll send it out in an email so you can get it delivered to your inbox in case you want to go back and revisit some of this really great discussion. So thank you, Basil, so much for sharing with us.
Thank you for having us. It's such an honor to serve all of you and to serve nature. Thank you for being here. Hope you enjoyed and learned something and were inspired by this discussion. Thank you, Realm of Caring, for providing this platform and this important guidance to the world.
Well said. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye.